I hope you guys are feeling blessed today. I hope you guys are feeling encouraged today. I hope you guys are feeling wonderful today.
That's right.
God is a good God, no matter what is happening around us. And God is faithful. I mean, faithful in all times, in all situations, in all circumstances. I mean, God is always with us. Always. Even when you nearly cut your finger off cutting a pumpkin for your wife. Same finger, different injury. You guys are wondering why I have this little funny looking thing on my finger. So I'm answering all of you now so I don't have to ask or answer a million times. You guys are like, what do you do? All right, I'll spare you the details. It's gross, okay? My son decided to follow suit, except he didn't injure his finger, he injured the back of his head. But if you ask him about his stitches, he's proud. He is really, really proud. You know how like a child, like they could fall into a door like a million times in their life and never injure themselves. But then there's that one time that they fall into the door just right. And there's blood everywhere. I don't know, sorry, that just came out really gross. I'm sorry. He's okay though, man. He was riding on his way to the ER, and the whole time he's riding there, he's holding the back of his head, and he's saying, "Not today, not today, oh, not today, God, not today." And my wife, his mom, she says, Joseph, not today. What? Not today. What are you talking about? And he just very plainly says, I don't want to die today. I've got a party at school tomorrow. So, Joseph, you're not going to die. You're not going to die. And then she adamantly is reminding him that he's going to be okay, but it took a doctor to finally tell him that he was going to be okay. They came in and they were, using a towel and they're like, oh, we'll get him right in. No details anymore. We'll get him right in, and then the doctor looks and he's like, oh, you're going to be just fine. And he's like, okay. So, but no, like, the hardest part, though, is, like, getting him to not run around. Because he got a mild concussion, and we're like, sit still. Yeah, right. So, we should have, I came earlier on in the week, thanks, Paula. But somebody stopped by my house earlier this week and gave me a roll of bubble wrap. And said, take care of yourself, Pastor. You guys should be laughing at me more. I'm giving you an opportunity here.
What did you do with the bubble wrap?
It's at home, sitting on the counter, still in its package. Yep. So today we are talking about culture shock. All right? We are living. No. Go sit down.
She told me to.
Go sit down. I'm good. I promise. I'm good. You are making trouble for me. All right. We have a good time here at church. We are currently in we're starting right now. We're starting a short series that is going to last likely 3 weeks. All right, we're going to lead up to the election, and then I'm going to preach after the election a final message, and we'll see how that goes. Depending on who gets in office, is going to really determine how a lot of you are feeling. All right, now I know that represented in this room are many different perspectives, many different thoughts, many different ideals on who should lead or who should be commander-in-chief. But I need to make a disclaimer, okay? I am a pastor, and I cannot make any statements about anybody, okay? So this is not like that. All right? I'm not going to say you should vote for and who it should be and all that stuff. This is the one thing that I'm going to say is read your Bible and pray and let your convictions lead. Okay? Please. So we're living in a place of culture shock. When we live in a culture that is spiritually corrupt, it is imperative for God's people to stand out, not to blend in. Christians are not better than other people, but they are different than other people. And when sinful behavior is promoted, God can give us the courage and the strength that we need to be both holy and humble. Both holy and humble. Truth is, we won't know what it's going to do to our nation as a whole until after a little while, after the election is over. We know that a lot is resting on this election. Now, as in with every other election that we've had, there are a lot of people that have said that this election is going to determine the trajectory of our country for years to come. This is the most important election of all time. And every time we come to this point, we pretty much say the same thing. This election is the most critical in history, and it is going to determine so much about our country, about where we're going, about what is happening. Now, yes, this election is important, but whoever lands in office, I still believe, and will continue to believe, that God is God,
Yes.
and that He can be trusted.
Amen.
God is God, and He can be trusted. Now, as we're talking about culture shock, this is kind of an introduction to some ideas that I'm going to give you, but as we're talking about shock, I wanted to look up the word shock in the dictionary, and it's got several different ideas. This is a sudden or upsetting or surprising event or experience. Now, we're having a lot of those these days. Synonyms for those is an upset or a disturbance, a surprise. A shock could be a revelation, a bolt from the blue or a thunderbolt, a bombshell, a rude awakening, an eye-opener. One of the definitions that really popped out to me is it says to feel surprised and upset or to offend the moral feelings of someone, or perhaps outraged. Now, best described, just kind of whittling this down a little bit, I would say that shock is a violent collision. A shock is a violent collision, described to collide violently. It would cause shock to the system. It would cause shock to the system. True talk for a moment here. We're living in a time that has caused an incalculable shock to the system. We know that we could take up whatever helm or whatever banner or whatever cross that we feel we need to take and begin to proceed or progress into the future and stand strong in what we believe in. We can. But we've got to be cautioned in that. We've got to be cautioned in that. Because I believe that how we proceed as Christians, as we proceed as what they, in the Bible times, they were called the way, as we proceed as those who are the way, as we proceed will ultimately determine the revelation of Christ to others. Now, some of us are fighting fights that aren't worth the battle. I'm going to read you guys 2 Timothy 3:1-9 real fast. In the English Standard Version, it says, godlessness in the last days. It's up there on the screen if you want to look at it there. It says, but understand this, that in the last days there will come times of difficulty, for people will be lovers of self, lovers of money. They will be proud, they will be arrogant, they will be abusive, disobedient to their parents, kids listen, ungrateful and unholy, heartless, unappeasable, slanderous, without self-control, brutal, not loving good, treacherous, reckless, swollen with conceit, lovers of pleasure rather than lovers of God, having the appearance of godliness but denying its power. Avoid such people. For among them are those who creep into households and capture weak women, burdened with sins and led astray by various passions, always learning and never able to arrive at the knowledge of the truth. Just as Jannes and Jambres, those were, just so you guys know, way back, you head back to Moses' time, all right? These were the two magicians that went toe-to-toe with him and were humiliated, all right, by what Moses was able to accomplish, all right? That's who he's referring to. Who opposed Moses. So these men also opposed the truth. Men corrupted in mind, or should also say men and women. Men and women corrupted in mind and disqualified regarding the faith. But they will not get very far, for their folly will be plain to all, as was that of those two men. Meaning that at some point, at some place, at some moment, the truth, the reality, is going to be exposed. Now, some of us, they want it exposed immediately, right now, in this moment. They want it out there. They want the truth. They want us to know. We want to know. But here's the reality is some of those things will remain hidden until that day, until the day the Lord returns. And all that was hidden will be revealed. All that was hidden will be revealed. And those of the human race old enough to know what's happening are feeling the pressure. They're feeling the pressure. I might be stretching it a little bit, but some of us feel jolted. When I say shocked, some of us feel jolted. Either that or we desensitized ourselves to what's happening. Honestly, and I know that sounds very harsh, but either we're jolted by the reality of our country, or we have just desensitized ourselves to the truths that are unfolding right in front of us. We're frightened, merely waiting for the breakdown, hopeful it doesn't happen. Or others who just assume to deafen their ears to the reality or blind their eyes to the disturbing images on media outlets. Now, I'm not saying that I guard my kids from some of the things that we can hear and see on the media outlets. I've grown increasingly frustrated with some of the images that are being put out there, and this culture shock is only intensified by Facebook and other social media outlets that, or just, getting online and Googling something, we can see so much, so rapidly. Or turning on the TV and watching the news. I was watching a video just the other day of a father telling his son that his mother was gone because of a drug overdose. She was dead. And it said that on the news article, it said that he had recorded this, or he had this recorded so that people could recognize the troubling reality of those who experience such great loss, in hopes that it would alert or awaken people to the truth. Okay? Worry about that kid. Because years later, he's going to be able to watch over and over again his father telling him that his mom is dead. And the reason that hits so hard at home, the reason that culture shock is something that I can feel so sensitive to and want to protect my children from, is when my own father was killed in a car accident when the 11 o'clock news came on, I saw the scene, and I saw paramedics working on him. And so at 9 years old, my mind was shocked by a very real thing. Changes a man, changes a woman. So where do we stand? Represented in this family is a mixed batch. Some believing in and I'm going to name them, but some believing in Trump, some believing in Clinton, some believing in independence. And there's this violent collide. Maybe here, and honestly, you know what? If you differ in opinions about who should be commander-in-chief, okay, different opinions. Don't lose friends over it, okay? What am I say about that? There's a fine line. And keeping a healthy national ideology as a citizen of the United States and elevating our position or voting privilege to such lofty place that our concern becomes more about who someone's vote is for as president rather than who they call Savior. We've got to watch out. In Ephesians 6, 10 through 12, and in verse 18, it says, "Be strong in the Lord and in his mighty power. Put on God's armor so that you will be able to stand firm against the strategies of the devil. For we are not fighting against flesh and blood enemies, but against evil rulers and authorities of the unseen world and against the mighty powers in the dark world." And again, evil spirits in the heavenly places. Pray in the Spirit at all times and on every occasion. Stay alert and be persistent in your prayers for all believers everywhere. At some point, we've got to realize that we are either in a flesh and blood fight or we are in a spiritually strong battle against darkness. Some of us, we believe that, or some folks believe that it's a flesh and blood, meaning it's human beings, it's us against them, it's us against them, and that's what's led so much in our country astray, is that we have seen our enemies as people instead of our great adversary. You see, our enemy is not the person sitting next to you or the person with an opposing perspective. Our enemy is the devil. That's our enemy. He's our enemy. And he wants to cause such divisive things to happen. We are in what appears to be a visible battle, but it's really spiritual. It's a cosmic conflict with eternal implications. People aren't our enemy. People aren't our enemy. You see, Christianity and culture will never be able to avoid the clash. The question is, will we fight against flesh and blood, or will we stand against evil principalities? Are you hearing me this morning?
Yes.
Will we fight against flesh and blood? Will we stand in our place or draw our line in the sand and say, I'm going to aggressively push against the culture, and will we begin to battle against other human beings, or will we battle against the evil spirits and the evil dark things that are attempting to continue to corrupt everything that is pure, everything that is lovely, everything that is beautiful? And some of us, some people in our country, some people in our world, some of us in this room, we might think that the devil himself is just a fictitious, made-up character. It's not real. And 2 weeks ago, it was late, about 11 o'clock, someone called me on the phone in another state. They're in another state. They're like, Pastor, I know I haven't talked to you for a while, and I know I got my own thing going on, but there's something going on here. I played around with something. I opened a door or something like that, and there's something evil that's scaring me and my roommates. Just scaring us. And I'm like, okay, let's talk. All right? There's a darkness. It's tempting. And it's hovering. A lot of people say that, and I'm praying and asking God to help us to refute and to push back. There's a lot of people that say that darkness in many ways is very present way up north here. Now, we live in a spiritually dark area. I would ask you, though, would you believe with me that you would oppose that perspective of believing that people here are shut off to the truth and recognize that though many don't have an understanding of who the true Savior is, that this is perfect ground for an awakening. Perfect ground for a move unlike any other. We've got to be holy. We've got to be separate. We've got to be different. We've got to be set apart to influence the world, to influence culture, to influence society. We've got to be set apart. We've got to be a different kind of people. We've got to make a difference in the world. To make a difference in the world, we've got to stand out. We've got to be different than the world. Yes, we live here. Yes, we exist here. Yes, this is what we call home right now. But we have got to be different. We've got to be stand out. People have got to notice something about us that is different. And I'm not just talking about, oh, well, I don't participate in that because I'm too pure and holy for that. No, when I say stand out, I'm talking about standing out in your decision to serve others, your decision to love others, your decision to participate and get involved and step into places that are uncomfortable for the sake of the soul of the individual that you are talking to. We are to be different. Jesus was different. There is no doubt in my mind, as uncomfortable as this thought might be to some people, there's no doubt in my mind that if Jesus were to hop on the scene right now, instead of when he did, he would be in the nightclubs and the pubs. He would be ministering to people there. No doubt in my mind. And then to influence the world, to change our culture, to change what's going on around us, we have got to be different. This is hard. I saw this quoted earlier on this statement: if you are more concerned about the presidential election than people's souls, you may be a citizen of the wrong kingdom. The gospel changes everything. I want to read you guys a text that is a very hard one to read. A very hard one for us to come under. And I know that we got to understand the Bible in its entirety and know that there are points and places in time that we don't necessarily become obedient to all things. There's a mega church pastor in another country that was just released after 7 years serving time for her faith, for being a Christian. And so, there are times when we say, nope, I'm not going to do that. And I understand that. But in 1 Peter 2, keep in mind, Rome has been set on fire and they're blaming Christians. But in 1 Peter 2, starting with verse 13, he tells us something that is hard. He says, for the Lord's sake, submit to all human authority, whether the king as head of state or the officials he has appointed. For the king has sent them to punish those who do wrong and to honor those who do right. Verse 15, it is God's will that your honorable lives should silence those ignorant people who make foolish accusations against you. For you are free, yet you are God's slaves. So don't use your freedom as an excuse to do evil. Respect everyone and love the family of believers. Fear God and respect the king. And it goes on to verse 18 and it says this. You who are slaves must submit to your masters with all respect. Do what they tell you, not only if they are kind and reasonable, but even if they are cruel. For God is pleased when, conscious of his will, you patiently endure unjust treatment. Of course, you will get no credit for being patient if you are beaten for doing wrong. But if you suffer for doing good and endure it patiently, God is pleased with you. God is pleased with you. This idea of slavery is challenging. And I know that this is a hard thing to really talk about today, and we're separated from that. So I would ask maybe in its context that you think about where you work, because honestly, some of us feel like we're slaves to our jobs. And we need to live in such a way that we submit or respect those who've been placed in authority over us. In verse 21, for God called you to do good, even if it means suffering, just as Christ suffered for you. He is your example. You must follow in his steps. He never sinned, nor ever deceived anyone. He did not retaliate when he was insulted, nor threatened revenge when he suffered. He left his case in the hands of God, who always judges fairly. He personally carried our sins in his body on the cross so that we can be dead to sin and live for what is right. By his wounds we are healed. Once you were like sheep who wandered away. I don't know if you guys know this, but sheep are dumb. Okay. Once you were like sheep who wandered away, but now you have turned to your shepherd, the guardian of your souls. These are hard words, church. This is a hard text to talk about this morning. When we're talking about culture shock and we're talking about what's happening as a nation, some of us are frightened because we don't know who's going to be in charge. And when that person is placed in charge, we don't know who is going to then be put in charge under them. It can be scary. But Peter is telling us here, respect them, live under them, submit to them, submit to human authority, and have confidence in your just God. These Christians, the followers of the way, were being unjustly lied about and persecuted. There were lies being told about them. There were lies being told about them. You go up a little bit, this is in the message, but in 1 Peter 2, 11 and 12, it says, friends, this world is not your home, so don't make yourselves cozy in it. Don't indulge your ego at the expense of your soul. Live an exemplary life among the natives so that your actions will refute their prejudices. Then they'll be won over to God's side and be there to join in the celebration when he arrives. There is something mysterious about the witness that results when you submit, even if it causes you to suffer. Even if it causes you to suffer. So as Christians, what should we do? We should vote, yes. We should discuss, yes. Of course. Those are things that we should do. But we need to make sure that when we find out or when we discover, when culture shocks us, when we are alerted to reality by something that is seen or something that is witnessed or by who is put in office, that we don't find ourselves throwing stones at others. You see, in this book that I was just reading from in 1 Peter chapter 2, I want you to think about this for just a minute. 40% of the Roman Empire was slaves. Okay? 40%. Let me put a number on that. That's about 18 million people. And this is what Peter's saying. This is what Peter's saying. In your holiness, you need to remember that you must stay humble. Holiness, the holiness that we live, the person we become, because of Christ in us, and changes everything, must be lived out from a place of modest, meek humility. Have you guys ever heard the name Viktor Frankl? Who's heard that name? Anybody? Okay. All right. This was a guy who he was an Australian neurologist and psychiatrist, as well as a Holocaust survivor. And he's the author of many books. One of those books is Man's Search for Meaning. And as he was taken captive and thrown into the concentration camp, he watched people, and he says he watched people in that concentration camp. The happiest became angry and hostile. The most optimistic committed suicide. And it was all because the Nazis had succeeded at what they set out to do. They wanted to steal the hope right out of the people that they were locking in those places. And Frankl said that he refused to give them his hope. These are the words he penned himself. They stripped me naked. They took everything. My wedding ring, my watch, and I stood there naked. And all of a sudden I realized at that moment that although they could take everything away from me, my wife, my family, my possessions, they could not take away my freedom to choose how I was going to respond. He goes on to say everything can be taken from a man, but one thing, the last of all human freedoms, to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances, to choose one's own way. Frankl said of those who had survived that they had some fixation, or in his own words, they had a fixed reference point beyond the camp. They didn't stay there. They weren't stuck in that place. Yes, the concentration camp itself was horrid. It was awful. But they didn't stay there. They didn't focus on what was happening in the moment. They didn't focus on their current experience. They had a fixated future mindset. They had a fixed reference point that was beyond the camp. And we've got to have a fixed reference point that is beyond this world, because this is just a part of, this is just a part. As the Bible says, life is but a blink, or a vapor, or a mist. You're here now, you're gone the next. Saturday morning, the phone rings, and it's a call from the hospital, and they said, someone's in ICU. They're asking for a pastor. They're asking for a pastor. I thought of you. Could you come immediately? Yeah, I'm on my way. Let's go. I left. I'm standing there in the ICU and watching this person as life itself is leaving them. Read the Bible. It's beautiful words. Read the Bible and it's beautiful words. And I recognized, as I do recognize often when I talk with people that are that close to eternity, that we are so close, more close than any of us could ever imagine. Those of you who are 20, 30 years older than me, the truth is I'm just as close as you are. Some of us feel like, well, I'm up there in age, so I'm closer to eternity than you are. But the truth is that there's no definitive, this is how long I'm going to live, or this is the estimated end date, okay? We live and we exist, and we could end at any point on this planet and enter eternity. We've got to hope for our homeland. What we fixate on is not what's happening here, but what will happen in eternity. Because Frankl, this guy who experienced the atrocities of Auschwitz said that they were fixated on a reference point beyond the camp. He further said, we who lived in the concentration camps can remember the men who walked through the huts, comforting others, giving away their last piece of bread. They may have been few in number, but they offer sufficient proof that everything can be taken from a man but one thing, the last of human freedoms. Like I said earlier, choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances. Choose one's own way. From the rising of the day to the end of the day, God is God, and nothing is going to change that. Ever. Ever. Nothing will change that ever. Nothing will defy that ever. Nothing will cause that to be any different. 1 Peter 2:11, if you got a bulletin, you can look there. I don't know, I think I might have put it on the screen there, but 1 Peter 2:11 and 12 says, friends, this world is not your home, so don't make yourselves cozy in it. Don't indulge your ego at the expense of your soul. Live an exemplary life among the natives so that your actions will refute their prejudices. Then they'll be won over to God's side and be there to join in the celebration when He arrives. As I ask every week, what about today's message affected you the most? Where do you stand? What's happening in your soul right now? What is God stirring in you? What is God doing to affect you as a result of the scripture that was read? The challenge and difficulty to say, okay, whoever lands in office, whatever may come, whatever culture I experience and whatever changes, whatever it is, my confidence is in God. You see, because the decisions we make, whoever is elected, will determine an immense amount of how we live out our faith. What will you choose? Is there something God is speaking to you today that will change the way you see the clash of faith and culture, and what will you do about it? This is my feeling, but I really believe that one of God's greatest plans is to change what is happening here, even though heaven is our home. And his mode of affecting the culture is you. His mode of affecting the culture is you. It's you. Because we are holy, set apart, but we've got to be humble. May we never, ever, ever stand in a place where we believe that we are better than others. We stand in the same place they are. The only thing that makes us different is the fact that we have cried out to Christ. I am as corrupt, broken, and awful as the next man. It's only by a Savior in my life is changed. Jesus, we thank you for this morning. We thank you for truth. We thank you for the reality of what was read here. Lord, I know that some of this, I felt like I kind of rushed through, but I pray that folks here would travel back to 1 Peter, God, and that they would read those words again, that they would recognize that there were so many in slavery, there were so many affected by those in leadership. They were being threatened, God, and they were being lied about and falsely accused. Much of what some of us as Christians here in this country feel is happening to us. We're being lied about and falsely accused. But God, I pray that we would be the difference, that we would be holy, that we would be set apart, but in that holiness that we would practice humility. And that would be such a credible proof to the world, such a credible proof to our society, that we would not stand with arms crossed, ready to throw stones at individuals who think differently than us, but that we would hit our knees and begin to battle darkness. Because we are not fighting flesh and blood. We are fighting evil. That our fellow man, our fellow woman, is not our enemy. The devil is. God help us. God help us. And lead us as we, with conviction, make our decisions in the weeks to come. Amen. Amen. Church, I'm here